auctions, of course, concluded yesterday evening. 7 bands were put up for auction by the government. It raked in about a little over 64,000 crore rupees. And to talk on all that in greater detail, who better than, of course, Secretary Telecom, Mr. JS Deepak. Sir, thank you so much for speaking to ET Now. My first question to you is, it was a mega spectrum sale, 7 bands, a lot of spectrum being put up on the table. Your first thoughts on the final results? Satisfied, not satisfied?
Well, looking back on these auctions, as you say, this is a very large auction in the volume and variety of spectrum that was put up, also the number of bands, and being a simultaneous ascending e-auction, both in complexity as well as in sophistication. It was perhaps right up there.
Right.
Of course, the spectrum auctions, the process of auctioning natural resources started with spectrum.
Right.
And so it is but to be expected that a spectrum auction would be the most sophisticated, and the auction, what is satisfying is that this auction system worked flawlessly.
Right.
And it helped us, through a transparent process, come to a market determined price of spectrum.
Right.
See, the government talks of ease of doing business and transparency in work. This is a vindication of that kind of a vision.
Right.
That actually large volumes of natural resources are being allocated transparently and at a market determined price.
Right.
So that, I think, is the first takeaway from this auction as far as I am concerned.
Right, right. So we'll talk about, several legs to this entire piece, of course, in greater detail. 700, government revenues, what happens next for the industry. Let's take them one by one. But first up, the fact that the government actually took a very bold decision this time around, did not create any spectrum scarcity. The entire spectrum that was available was put up for sale for the industry. Do you think that was a reason why the results were below expectations?
The way I look at it, there are 3 headlines to this auction.
Mm-hmm.
The first is, as you mentioned, we put up a huge amount of spectrum for auction, and the spectrum sold is about 965 megahertz.
Right.
This makes it a huge amount of spectrum which has now become available with industry to roll out networks and to provide services. This 965 megahertz is more than the amount of spectrum sold cumulatively in the auctions that we did in 2012, 13, 14 and 15.
Right.
So we sold 930 megahertz in those 4 auctions.
Right.
Here we have sold 965 megahertz. So the problem of the industry regarding being starved of spectrum, and that being a constraint to providing quality of services, is over. According to me, spectrum scarcity in India is now history.
Right.
There are many things which bedevil good quality services and provision of good quality services.
Right.
Spectrum issues will no longer be one of them.
And
The second takeaway is on the revenues. The government put all the spectrum to auction. There was no attempt to create a scarcity to artificially push up prices, and that has been duly appreciated by the industry. If you look at the bids reached about 66,000 crores.
Yes.
The upfront revenue which we get is about 32,000, which is accrued from this auction, is 32,000 crore, minimum of 32,000 crores. And again, the upfront revenue collection is the highest ever in the last 5 years. It's more than the auction in 2012 or 13 or 14 or 15.
Right.
So that's good for the government. I am touched by the concern of many people about government revenues.
Right.
And let me point out that this is, as far as revenue in the financial year from an auction is concerned, the highest in the last 5 years. In addition, This year we have a 15% service tax levied on spectrum, which was not there last year.
Right.
So as far as government revenues are concerned, it's 32,000 plus 15% at the minimum.
So that's a huge amount. So
I mean, revenues you'll always want more than what you have, but
Right.
this is the kind of revenue that we are going to get from this auction.
So the one wonders that, if you take aside 700 megahertz, which is a separate discussion altogether we'll have, it has actually been a huge success for the government. Not only have you sold a lot of spectrum, you've actually raked in far higher than previous auctions. So it's actually been a huge success for the government.
Yeah, on these parameters, that putting enough spectrum in the hands of industry for providing quality of services, of getting high upfront revenues, highest ever since 2010, and the fact that the electronic auction system worked flawlessly, it's been a win-win-win, and we are quite satisfied with this on these three scores.
You mentioned that spectrum scarcity will be history now. So will you hold telecom companies to task now if service quality doesn't improve?
I wouldn't put it that way. We've been working with telecom operators to continue to improve quality of services, and we've had a facilitating approach.
Right.
The one genuine problem they had, two genuine problems they had was in
Right of way.
right-of-way and spectrum availability.
Right.
Now, spectrum availability, as I said, is no longer going to be a problem. There is enough spectrum in the bands they want, in the quantities they want, and contiguous spectrum available with them. We are working with the industry and with local bodies and others to make sites available, and there's a great improvement in this as well. In the last 100 days, almost 9,000 additional sites have been put up, BTSs have been put up in Delhi itself. So it's happening.
It's happening. Okay. Now let's just talk about government revenues. There are all sorts of figures that are there. To the best of my understanding, the figure in the budget mentioned about 99,000 from spectrum sale, which included 99,000 from telecom, which included. If we were to use that benchmark, then you've fallen short of the revenues. But help us understand that what is the exact target that was there from spectrum sale, and have you achieved or overachieved that?
The figures in the budget and the revenues from the telecom sector that is to come in this financial year, of course, there are details of it, and we have a number of sources of revenue,
Right.
including the spectrum auctions.
Right.
As far as the agreed figure between the Department of Telecom and the Ministry of Finance is concerned,
Right.
the amount of revenue that has to come from spectrum auctions for meeting that figure,
Right.
we are almost there.
Okay.
And we wait for 10 days to see what are the actual amounts of revenues we get. And let me assure you, we are on track to achieving our revenue targets for the fiscal 16-17.
So it is not 55,000 crore rupees.
No, it's certainly not 55,000 crores.
Okay. And what is that in the range of then, if you've achieved that?
Let's not get into that.
Okay. Okay. And then, so just to understand, then what happens for the overall 99,000 crore? Obviously, the government's finances definitely get a different picture because they've budgeted for 99,000 from telecom overall. So what happens to government finances then? Do they get stretched? Because you're saying you're meeting your targets, but then government finances, do they get stretched?
We have 6 more months to go, so wait and watch.
What are the other components that can come in besides spectrum sale?
We have a number of components which you are aware of. We have license fee, we have spectrum charges, we have other charges.
Are you likely to get the other charges as well? Because telecom, of course, is a sector which is massively into litigation. To the best of my memory, most charges are in some court or the other. What are the likelihood of all these levies actually
We are
coming?
working on various issues, and I'd only advise you to watch the space.
Okay, so you're saying the overall government revenues will be 32,000 plus 15% service tax, which is in the range of about 35,000 crore rupees, and you're meeting the target for this year.
The revenues are the auction upfront revenues will be more than 32,000 crores, and in addition, government gets 15% service tax, which has
Right.
been levied this year, which was not last year.
Right. So now let's just move on to the other piece in the auction, which was the 700 megahertz. A lot has been talked about in terms of the fact that industry wasn't really prepared to be able to take this kind of pricing. In hindsight, do you think there was a possibility of revisiting the price?
Well, the auction results show that the market finding is
Right.
that there is no demand at the reserve price
Right.
for 700 megahertz spectrum. So we have that spectrum, which is valued at reserve price at about 4 lakh crores.
Right.
And we will see what is to be done with that. It will be the reason why 700 there was no demand for 700 is basically twofold, or maybe threefold. One is the price, reserve price. The other is the non-existence of an ecosystem,
Right.
and the third is the fact that if anyone took the spectrum, then they have to hold it for a number of years
Right.
before they could monetize it.
Right.
So we'll look at all these issues and see what should be the way forward.
There has been a precedent, sir, in 2012 when there was the auction. CDMA was completely not taken by the industry. There was a precedent that prices were slashed not once but twice by the government. Can we expect a similar situation here for 700 as well? Is there a case for the government to relook at the pricing completely?
Now, at this point of time, we are looking at the completion of the auction process, the approvals, the assignment of frequencies.
Yeah.
What is to be done ahead, we'll take a call on it much later.
Fair enough. Sir, one final question on 700 before we move on is that, TRAI did come out with this pricing. Is there a case, do you think, to be able to actually assign the role of allocation or deciding of spectrum pricing to an expert panel? Of course, there is Telecom Commission, which has representation from other ministries as well. But do you think there is a case for actually having an expert panel as well to relook? Because it's a very tricky issue. At no point of time can the government or senior bureaucrats like you afford to not even think of CAG and all those options. Do you think there is a case for an expert panel to be doing this work?
Not really. There's a system in the TRAI setup of floating consultation papers, getting expert opinion, and they have gone through that process. And this price which they have recommended, which the government has accepted as reserve price, is on the basis of consultation with all kinds of experts and stakeholders. So I think there's no problem with the process. Maybe we need to look at it
Differently.
afresh.
How soon can we look at it afresh?
I will not be able to speculate on that.
Find us on Facebook at facebook.com/ETNow and don't forget to click the like button. You can also follow us on Twitter at ETNowLive. To stay updated with all our programming, hit the subscribe button on our YouTube channel by logging on to youtube.com/user/ETNow.